Today, we are glad to welcome our guest presenter, Jared Hill. We'll get to him in just a moment. My name is Shane Severson. I'm with the Utah Prisoner Advocate Network. We're grateful to have you here tonight to learn, share, and advocate for our incarcerated loved ones. For those of you that are joining for the first time, we would like to welcome you and just do a few housekeeping matters. First of all, this is a Zoom call and it is being recorded, so the video recording will be available on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Utah Prisoner or at our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and search for Utah Prisoner Advocate Network, our YouTube channel comes up there, and our recordings will be there. You'll be able to watch that. I try to have it posted later on tonight, and then you can go back. Also, for those of you that are in the Zoom meeting tonight, please try to keep yourself muted when you're not talking to help keep the background noise to a minimum. Feel free to post a question in the Zoom chat. You can use the raise hand functionality if and when we get to the question portion. If you're joining on a mobile device, just so you know, sometimes the interface disappears, and so if you can't see the button, you just need to tap on your screen to get that to come up for you. Just real quick, I would like to tell you a little bit about the UPAN link tree. We've consolidated all of the important, most important links to UPAN, various areas such as the where do I find the meeting link, how do I subscribe to the newsletter, how do I reach out to UPAN. But we've also got some helpful point of contacts for the people at UDC that can help answer your questions. We've got their contact information on there and links to the UDC's website, Board of Pardons website, and more on there. So we put this link in one place. It's at linktree/Utah Prisoner. So if you bookmark any links, you can just bookmark that and you'll always have the most current links. So first of all, we recommend that you do that. And then just real quick, I'd like to run through about what UPAN, for the people that are new to UPAN, unfamiliar with UPAN and who we are. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, all volunteer grassroots organization, and we are dedicated to advocating for meaningful change within Utah's criminal justice system. And our primary mission is to promote reform, provide support to the incarcerated individuals and their families, and work towards a more just and humane prison system. We were founded in 2013 by individuals deeply passionate about justice, many of whom have personal experiences with the criminal justice system. UPAN is committed to amplifying the voices of those who are marginalized and often overlooked. We believe in the dignity and worth of every person, including those who are incarcerated, and we work tirelessly to advocate for their rights and well-being. So through education, outreach, collaboration, and community partners, we address issues like prison conditions, access to healthcare, mental health services, rehabilitation and reentry programs, and the impact of mass incarceration on families and communities. We do this in four primary ways, first of which is education. We host these monthly support meetings, and we also send out the UPAN newsletter to help to keep the public informed on the important issues. Second, we engage in open discussions with Utah Department of Corrections and county jail administrators to advocate for change and address concerns. Legislative advocacy, we do citizen training on how to reach out to your lawmakers to share or testify on laws or policies that might impact your family or incarcerated loved ones, to help promote fairness and accountability within the criminal justice system. And then lastly, community engagement. We host guest speakers like Mr. Hill tonight, form coalitions with like-minded organizations, and we also maintain a network of helpful resources. That network is made up of criminal justice advocates, industry professional, volunteers, expert advisors, coalition organizations, formerly incarcerated individuals, and up to 3,000 Utah families of the incarcerated, and we continue to grow. The core of our work are the stories and experiences of incarcerated individuals and their families. By listening to their voices and working together, we hope that we can create meaningful change and hopefully build toward a more equitable and compassionate society. So if you're a longtime supporter or new to our cause, we invite you to join in making a difference. We have, again, from our Linktree website that I had just mentioned, we've got these 4 links posted there, but just to call out specifics, we have the UPAN website, utahprisoneradvocate.org. You can visit us there. Our Facebook page is very active, facebook.com/utahprisoner. And then we also have two private groups. One is called the UPAN Family Support Group. So if you're a family member, we've created this safe place for you to go so that you can talk to other family members and share information, seek advice, get emotional support. UPAN directors are also on there to help moderate. It's a great place to keep the conversation going in between these meetings. And for those of you that are volunteers or in various working groups, we have a volunteers committees working group so that you can link up with other volunteers and work towards a specific issue. So just real quick, I'm not going to go over everybody, but introductions. This is our UPAN team of UPAN directors and volunteers. Every person here plays a critical role in making UPAN a reliable and effective resource for families like yours. So everywhere from addressing medical and mental health concerns to policy advocacy, programming, reentry resources, and more, our team brings expertise and passion to everything that we do. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or need of support in a specific area. Our general contact and email is contact@utahprisoneradvocate.org for general inquiries. If you do have an urgent medical issue, you can reach out to our med team at medteam@utahprisoneradvocate.org. We have a couple of nurses on there, and also Molly is a mental health practitioner to help direct you to the appropriate medical resources. We're entirely volunteer run, and our work wouldn't be possible without the support of volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering, we encourage you to reach out to us at volunteer@utahprisoneradvocate.org. You don't need any prior experience, but we're looking for honest, reliable, and self-motivated individuals to help further our mission. So just reach out to us, introduce yourself, and tell us what you're interested in, and we can see if we can find an area for a right fit for you. So next, I am really excited to welcome back from UDC, we have Director Jared Hill. Mr. Hill had presented to us a few months ago, and as things are continually changing at UDC, we're so excited to have him back to talk about the UDC Sex Offender Treatment Program. So I'm going to turn the time over to you, Mr. Hill.
Great, welcome. Thanks for having me back. So let me see if I can. Oh, okay, you're sharing your screen. Let's see if I can share my. Okay. Okay, is it working?
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I hope not many of you heard me before, or maybe that would be good. I have a couple of stats to share that were the same as I shared last time, but we've made a ton of changes, so I'm excited. I got a ton of questions from all of you. I got about 40 questions, and I put this PowerPoint together that should cover a lot of them, but hopefully we have some time at the end to cover some more, because there were some questions that came in late about visiting, and I don't have anything in my slides about visiting, but I would love to talk about visiting. We've actually done a couple of new themes with visiting that may answer some of your questions and some of the things that are happening. So one thing that's really strange, so I've been the director of sex offense treatment since December of 2024, so not very long. Prior to that, I spent about 12 years as the program director of the San Pete County Jail. I've been working with sex offenders since 2006. I spent 8 years working with adolescents with problematic sexual history, and then I moved on to adults in 2013. And so I have a lot of experience working with this population. And then about, since December of 2024, I've been the Utah Department of Corrections Director of Sex Offense Treatment. So I'm excited to be here. There's been a lot of changes over the last year, and I'm excited to talk about them. So ultimately, I think we all have the same goal. When I travel with different stakeholders and talk to different people, sometimes it feels pretty adversarial, but I think we all have the same goal. Ultimately, we don't want to have any more victims. We want to keep the society safe. We want to be able to reduce risk of sexual offending. And that's kind of our main goal. One question that someone asks is like, what are you guys really trying to do? What we're really trying to do is identify risk of sexual reoffending and reduce that risk based on evidence-based practices as much as we can. And we've really implemented a lot of these changes over the last little bit. We also want to use resources effectively. I'm going to show you guys some stats about what our numbers look like. So you can get an idea of how many people are coming through our programs, kind of the size of our wait lists. It is imperative that we use our resources in effective and efficient ways, or we're just going to be underwater. And this is an incredibly challenging year, as I'm going to show you, about getting people treated as much as we can. So one thing that's kind of interesting about these things is there's the problem, well, not necessarily the problem, but one of the interesting things about treating people with problematic sexual behaviors is the recidivism rates tend to be lower than people think, but sometimes the impact of sex crimes are really high. So I want you to keep in mind as we talk about this, these are a lot of the confusion and issues that come up with all of these things are maybe not understanding that there is a difference between risk of sexual offending and the impact of sexual offending. Because every now and then we'll get a guy who's statistically very high risk for possibly a low impact crime. And then sometimes we get people that are really maybe low risk for a high impact crime. And those two things sometimes make it difficult for the Board of Pardons to want to release people, and a couple of other things that are happening. We might write to the Board of Pardons and say, hey, statistically, this guy is low risk. Maybe we'll even say that if you get 100 guys like him, we'll expect 3 of these guys to reoffend and maybe 97 of these guys not to reoffend. And the Board of Pardons will take a look at their history and say, but what happened was terrible and we don't want to risk it, even if that risk is like between 1% and 3%. So I think sometimes always in the back of our mind when we're working with stakeholders is the impact of some of these crimes. Even though the statistics show that guys that come through our program recidivate at much lower rates than many other crimes, the impact of these crimes are so high that sometimes it causes a lot of people pause. And you guys are probably aware, politically in Utah, we're kind of having a backlash against some sex offender reform laws. And there have been several laws passed in Utah this year that actually made it, raised the minimum prison time for sex offenders and made releasing sex offenders more difficult. And so we've been facing a lot of those different things. And we'll talk about some specific stuff as we move along. So just a general idea. Some of you have seen these stats before, but like, where does Utah fit with maybe all these other states about sex offenses? This is not my favorite statistic, but Utah ranks 7th overall for rapes per capita compared to all the other states. And most of our crimes, Utah is on the lower end of almost every crime. I mean, I don't know if my stats are current, but I think we're 49th in murders. There's only one state that murders people more than Utah, but Utah's 7th for rape. So for whatever reason, we're really elevated in some sex crime areas, even if we're lower in a lot of other areas. So we rank about, still on the high, but kind of mid-range for the number of registered sex offenders per capita. But the statistic where we're the largest, and this impacts a lot of you guys here in this meeting, is Utah, compared to all the other states, ranks number 1 in percentage of incarcerated sex offenders among prison populations. So in Utah, about 33 to 36% of all prisoners have sex offenses, and the national average is about 6%. So we have a lot of sex offenders in the prison population. And I think I've been thinking a lot about this. I think the reason for a lot of these is because, well, for one, if we're lower in all the other crimes and we have, sex crimes where we're a little bit higher, then it would make sense that we're kind of more represented for that. But also, I believe that Utah has one of the highest, some of the longest prison sentences. And so if you're in Utah and you get arrested for a sex crime, it's likely that you're going to do years and years compared to other places. So I'm a trainer for one of the risk assessments, the Static 99 and the Stable 2007. A lot of the stats come from a lot of the stuff was written in Canada. A lot of the stats are in Canada, and I was training a bunch of AP&P agents, and one of the stats is, hey, this guy got arrested 3 times for sex offenses. He did 180 days in jail and then was released on probation. And all of the 18 pages are saying, where is this place? Because in Utah, these would all be life sentences. And so that's one of the main reasons why Utah has the number one ranking for percentage of incarcerated sex offenders. Is we're just higher in that area. Plus, we just keep people in prison for a really long time. And I think that kind of impacts some of these different things. So when a bill came across this year about maybe raising the length of time people do time in prison for sex offenses, one of the things that I said is we're already kind of like number one in the world for this. I mean, how do we increase this even longer? And some of the statistics, so for instance, some of the Scandinavian countries are doing just a small percentage of time versus Utah, and their recidivism rates are about equal to ours. So there's really not a lot of research that suggests that doing really long prison sentences for sex crimes reduces recidivism numbers. But these are things, I guess this is in par with what you guys are trying to do with some reform of laws and stuff. But I just wanted to, that's how we fit with everybody else. So we're trying to get our own reoffense rates. So these are all individuals that were released in 2021. We tracked them for 3 years. So it was a total of 483 people. And then we tried to, so we're doing these little 3-year cohorts, and we're going to try to put it together into larger groups to get a really good idea of maybe how many people are coming back to prison for new sex crimes. And so this is just, I mean, actually all of the data sets that I have look kind of similar to this. But this is, anyway, so one of the things that's kind of staggering, if you look right at that very first statistic, how many people came back for only parole violations? It's about 45%. So many of these guys are coming back to prison for something. I'm actually going to break this down and show you what these numbers look like in a second, but I want to get these numbers down. I think 45% of people coming back for parole violations is just really, really high. But how many people are arrested for a new non-sex crime? About 5% of those guys were doing. How many people came back for a new sex crime? About 2%. And that's what we're finding for all of these. About between 2 and 4% of our guys are coming back for new sex crimes. This is a 3-year period, so it's really small. Also, our definition of recidivism is convicted of new sex crimes. So it's actually probably the most narrow version we can. So I'll show you in a second about some other statistics that maybe make that a little bit more. But that's just a general idea. When I said before the baseline of sexual offending is low, that's kind of what I mean by that. In a 3-year period, we're expecting between 2 and 4% of our guys to come back for new sex crimes. So we're really hoping that that number is going to be 0. But a portion of our guys are coming back for that, even though this is much too high for me, this 45% that are coming back for parole violations. So speaking of parole violations, I did a project recently that was actually really fun. My team and I looked at every parole violation in 2025. So every parole violation that resulted in someone coming back to prison, someone that has a sex offense. And there were 272 parole violations in 2025. And this was the breakdown of what all of those numbers looked like. The vast majority, about 60%, came back for what we would call a technical parole violation. So these are things that they're not allowed to do because they're on supervision, but are not illegal. And I'll break that down and I'll show you what all of those numbers are, because it was really important for us to get a very clear idea of what these people are coming back for and why. But there are some things here that I didn't like very much. So we had about 16% of these parole violations that are coming back for non-sexual crimes. So things like theft, things like breaking and entering, things like this, even assault. And then this next one here that we call concerning behaviors. This is the bar that actually kind of makes this number here with the number of sex offenses a little bit different. So this is 10% of the parole violations that were coming back, and they were coming back for things that maybe looked like were being set up for sex crimes. At least they were very risk relevant concerning behaviors, but maybe they didn't get arrested for it. So for instance, it could be someone who the parole officer found that they were writing in search terms such as they wanted to see children naked or something like that in their phone. And we didn't have any evidence that they were looking at naked pictures, so they couldn't be charged for a crime, but it looked like they were trying to. Or, for instance, there was a guy that came back for following children around in the toy section at Walmart. Things, things like this, where, or a guy that was taking pictures of children while hiding in a bush in a park. It's not illegal to do that, and we're going to put that in concerning behavior. So it didn't count in the larger number of recidivism, but still, it was a concerning behavior. So even though it's between 2 and 4% of these guys are coming back for new sex crimes, we could probably inflate that another 5% for guys that maybe AP&P caught prior to, doing a sex crime. And then this next thing is, and this is something that we need to change because the next spot is new domestic violence crimes. And that was about 5% of these guys coming back for new domestic violence crimes. And the Department of Corrections just doesn't have any way of handling it right now. We have no treatment programs designed for domestic violence. I would imagine we're all working on it. I think in the next couple of years, we probably will have some more programs for that. But for some of these guys, they went to prison for hitting a spouse or something like that, and then did some time in prison and came out with no treatment. So I think this is kind of a hole in the program. So about 5% of these parole violations were what we would count as new sex crimes. But we also counted things that, like, whether or not they were convicted of it, we still counted it as a new sex crime if it looks like they did it. Maybe they didn't have enough evidence to get caught with it, but I wanted to get a good idea of what these numbers looked like. So that's kind of where it is. And I think that's kind of where there's some issues with, even though there are most of the guys that come out of prison do not commit new sex crimes, there are enough that we really have to watch some of these things. And sometimes I'll have clients that just get really mad at parole officers and really mad at the system. And I have to have a conversation with them like, well, yeah, I do think the system has a lot of areas it needs to reform. I think there's a lot of areas that we need to be able to fix. But also, it's really hard to show that there are many people that did the prison program, did their time, and came out and continue in these types of behaviors. And so we really have to figure this out because it's going to be hard to make a lot of change in the areas that we want to if we continue to have people that come out and recidivate in sex crimes. That's going to make everything a lot more difficult. So this is my favorite of these graphs. It's a lot of information, so I apologize, but I think, so I told you 60% of these guys were coming back for technical violations. I wanted to say what these are. These are things that are not actually crimes. So the largest percentage of these guys, so if your loved one is going to come back to prison on a parole violation, these are the things that we've seen are more likely for them to come back. The largest percentage, about 20%, is what we call Group A violations. So these are guys that have unauthorized contact with the minors. We didn't think that there was anything going on untoward. We didn't think that there was any sex offending going on, but this is like someone's sister picks them up from work but has kids in the back seat, something like that. Or a guy is dating a woman and she has children and he doesn't tell the parole officer. Or he attends a birthday party and there's some children there and he doesn't tell his parole officer. So any of these kind of, we call them Group A conditions. And I can see why they have some of these things, but it's a big percentage, about 20% of the total of the 60% are coming back from that. This is an area that I really want to change, this next one, this lack of progress. Almost 20%, about 18% of these guys are coming back for failure to get employment. We're actually in the process of trying to create a parole violator program at a halfway house that instead of sending guys back to prison, we'd really like, it doesn't make any sense to me to take a guy who can't get a job and then send him to prison and then take him back out because he still can't get a job. We didn't fix the problem. All we did was put him in prison. And maybe putting in prison is supposed to wake him up, which I think is kind of the thought behind it, but I just don't think it's very effective. I don't like it. So we have enough of these guys. That was a big question we have when we started this is, can we create a parole violator program to be able to focus on some of these guys? So maybe we don't have to have them go back into prison. We can actually set them up and they can come out and maybe be more successful. So anyway, 15% are looking at pornography or engaging in legal but technically prohibited adult sexual behavior. 15% are going back for drug use. 13%, these are guys that just ran away. They had just absconded. They were at a halfway house and just walked away. The parole officers know where they are. And then we have, guys that are failure to register, and, things of that nature. So that's kind of what it is. And so they're really, I don't know if that's surprising or not to some of you, but that encompasses almost all of the parole violations and what we know of why guys are coming back to prison. And so if I was going to give any advice to any of my clients, it would be some of these rules are kind of stupid, but you need to follow them anyway. Even if it doesn't make sense. Drug use, pornography seems to be really high. I mean, that's about 30% if you combine drug use and pornography. And then if you combine like other types of crime, we can get that away. That's all in the control of these guys that are getting out to be able to do. So anyway, some of these guys come back really frustrated with parole officers, and I do think AP&P can improve in a lot of these areas, but a lot of these guys, really need to learn how to get through life without viewing pornography or, kind of jumping through hoops for some of these things. So, okay. One of the questions that people asked is, what are we looking for? Like what skills, when someone gets into the treatment program in prison, what are we actually doing with them? What does treatment mean? So at this point in time, there's quite a few things that we know that affect reoffending, and there are some things that we thought affected reoffending that really don't. Like we used to think if you did sex offense treatment like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we used to really focus on accountability. We used to really focus on making them take empathy classes. And all of those things are very important. And we still want people to be accountable. And I want them to have empathy. But the research is showing that some empathy classes aren't as effective as we thought. And programs that really focus on accountability aren't as effective as some other things. And so this is what we know. We know that there are things that are predictive of sex offending. And we also know that there's things that if people have protect you against sex offending. So there's kind of two ways of looking at sex offense treatment. One is the what to do, and the other is like what not to do. So this list I'm showing right now is the like what not to do. If we identify any of these areas, these are areas that are treatment targets that we're going to be focusing heavily on in treatment. So some of them are negative emotionality. This is when someone kind of blames the world for things. This is for someone that has a chip on their shoulder that just easily feels like everybody's against them. If someone has this personality trait, they're at a slightly higher likelihood of reoffending versus someone that doesn't have that trait. And that could be a focus. Some of these seem, pretty obvious. People with high sex drives are more likely to reoffend than people with low sex drives. But also one thing that's maybe a little bit more surprising is people that use sex as a coping strategy. Some people either look at pornography or try to find sex partners when they're bored or when they're sad or when they're angry. And they have that connection between that. And the research shows that kind of blinds people from being able to have empathy. So empathy is still incredibly important, but some of these things on the list kind of block empathy. So feeling like someone's against you sort of blocks empathy. And so these are some areas. Also, like a high predictor is people that have sexual interest in children or maybe sexual interest in some kind of illegal sexual activity. And there are some assessments that we do. We used to use a penile plethysmograph, and now we use an ABLE assessment to help find people that have sexual interest in children and find ways of being able to help people manage that and cope with that. Some people have, if you look at this list, it's kind of divided into two areas. People that have some antisocial traits, or maybe like what we call psychopathy or sociopathy, they also are at increased risk of being arrested for sex offenses, but also people that have pedophilia or deviant sexual interests that are at a higher rate. So one of you guys asked me, well, how do you tell that someone is high risk versus low risk? And we have a couple of different risk assessments that we use. We use the Static 99 and the Stable 2007. And generally, what those tools are trying to do is to help us identify if any of these areas are prevalent or not. And so when I say that someone is high risk, it's because we've identified that there are several of these risk categories that exist and that are a treatment target. And so when someone asks me how long is treatment going to be, we have some general timeframes and there's some general ideas of how long that is. But also one of the ways that we decide whether someone is done with treatment or not is whether or not they have continuing risk. If at the beginning of treatment, so I can, like on the Stable 2007, I can score on any of these items, I can score a 0, a 1, or a 2. A 0 means we don't think this person has this issue at all. A 1 is we think that they have it, but maybe it's somewhat manageable or minor. And then a 2 is this is a definite problem. If someone's been in treatment for a while and we still have several 2s in these areas, it's difficult to write to the Board of Pardons and say, we think this guy's done. I mean, someone asked, like, well, how do you know they're done with treatment? And that's really one way that we need to be able to do. We do pre and post assessments, and we're really hoping that a person in our program can demonstrate the reduction of risk throughout time. If someone shows that they have a lot of anger towards women, throughout treatment, we should have been able to identify thought processes connected to anger towards women, be able to develop skills and be able to communicate and other types of skills that would be connected to these types of things, and be able to show over time a reduction in these types of things. Some of this is difficult to do in prison, especially with anger towards women. There's sometimes not a lot of women around to be able to demonstrate these types of things. But in some of these areas like impulsivity, they can show pretty good reductions as it goes. And so that's not, I mean, we do release people even when they have risk. We like to show a treatment plan connected to that and a plan for them to continue in aftercare treatment to address these risks. But we're not just putting people in treatment willy-nilly and just having everyone go through the same type of thing. We really are creating a customized treatment plan to address some of these areas. And these are all the risk factors. The other side of the coin is what we would call a protective factor. So there's a whole bunch of things that they can do that insulate them from risk. So if you have a loving relationship that works for you, both platonically and romantically, both of those things are really good. If you have a steady job, if you have a place to live, all of these things tend to insulate someone from risk of sexual offending. So when some of your loved ones are going through the program and they say they're taking the Building Resilience course, our Building Resilience course is a protective factor program where we help people build some of these things. We help them build positive coping strategies. We help them identify some of these protective factors that maybe they're deficient in and help them create a plan to be able to develop that. And then our core program really focuses on addressing and reducing these areas of risk. And so generally, we will be separating people into 3 risk groups, as we'll talk about later. We have people on the lower end of risk. We have people in the moderate end or the average end. And then we have people in the above average or well above average risk range. And as you can see from some of these things, people on the lower end of risk probably don't have any 2s on this list. They might have a couple of 1s, but they might score, between a 3 and a 6 on the stable. And then we have people in the middle that, we have a lot of risk areas to look at. And then the people on the higher end of risk, when you look at this list, they tend to be pretty impulsive. They tend to have a lot of anger. They have a history of violence. They tend to have high sex drives or, all these types of things. And so when we're identifying them, there probably are several areas that we're kind of looking at. So this is what I said before. These are areas that are important, and but they're just not that connected to risk in the research. And so we probably don't focus on them very much in the program. So self-esteem isn't generally connected to recidivism when we track sex offenders. Empathy training doesn't seem to help that much. It's probably more effective to reduce their barriers to empathy than it is to like treat empathy directly. There's a question about whether or not, like for instance, in the past, one of the things that we would do is we would have them write a letter to their family member showing that they understood the effects of their crime. And I still think that's a helpful thing to do, and I still think that it's important for them. But what we found is guys that feel like everyone's against them, they might have empathy that works, but in the moment they don't use it because they react with anger. And so sometimes it's more effective for us to stop whatever blocks their empathy rather than like training empathy, if that makes sense. But that's one of the changes that's happened in the field over the time. And also mental health is very, very important. It's just the research doesn't connect it very much to sex offending. So because of that, we don't treat it in our program. What we would do in a lot of these cases, because these are important areas, is we would put it in their discharge summary for treatment outside of prison, or we can refer them to other programs within the prison. So even though sex offenders generally have a higher history of trauma than other people, addressing that trauma is helpful for them, but doesn't necessarily connect to reductions in risk. So we don't put it as a treatment target for the sex offense program, even though many times I will write a discharge summary asking for that to be addressed in aftercare treatment because it does affect their quality of life. And a lot of times people want to have that addressed. It just probably isn't, it would be what we would call a secondary focus of treatment rather than a primary focus of treatment. And one thing that causes a lot of discussion in the sex offense treatment world is this denial of crime. It does get in the way, and I think all of us would really like people to be open with crime, open with what they did. But what happens is the research shows that people can deny their crime throughout most of treatment and still get benefits from treatment. And I think one of the reasons for that is I think everybody here that's listening to me has done something that they're really ashamed of, and they don't really want to talk about it with someone, but they still don't want to do it again. It's still possible for you to be like, I'm really embarrassed about that, and I'll probably downplay it, but I'm still not planning on doing it. And so there's enough people like that that it messes up the statistics. And so because of that, focusing directly, it used to be that if you denied your crime, we wouldn't let you in the program. And we do let people in the program now. And it causes problems for our therapists sometimes because if you have a guy in group that's denying his crime, sometimes that causes a cohesion problem with the group. Some of these guys are difficult to work with. And my experience is many people deny their crime. And then as they get comfortable in treatment, they start opening up. And so I think it's probably not effective for us to refuse to have them in treatment at all when maybe 3 or 4 months down, they're willing to say stuff. And I've also had clients willing to open up a little bit to me, but maybe not talk about everything. Like they'll say like, yeah, I did more than I told you when we first got together, but they're still not ready to tell me all of the details. And frankly, I showed you all the list of the stuff that we're focusing on. Nowhere in there requires them to give me lots of details about their crime. I can still work on their anger. I can still work on their feeling like they don't belong. I can still help them work on their sexist coping, regardless of whether or not they are denying their crime or not. And so we've changed our treatment agreements recently so that it used to be that we wouldn't let people in if they were denying crime, but now they sign saying that regardless of whether they agree or disagree with their conviction, they agree to be fully open and work on all of the treatment assignments. So if someone gets kicked out of our program, it's not because they are denying their crime necessarily, but it might be because occasionally we'll get a guy that says, well, I'm innocent, so I can't do your treatment assignment. And that puts us in a bad spot because I'm like, well, I can't write to the Board of Pardons to say you're done if you're refusing to do half the stuff we're asking you to do. And so we might have guys occasionally, if we've done a structured risk assessment, aiming at one of the things, and a guy just says, I'm not going to do it, we just don't have a way forward in some of these cases. Sometimes we'll say, well, how about you think about it and then come back when you're ready to do it. And I often have guys that are just want to kind of cut and pick and choose what parts of the program that they do. And that doesn't really work very much for us. If people are going to cut and choose what they're going to do, we do expect them, if we do a structured treatment plan, we expect them to participate in it. And frankly, the majority of the guys do. Almost everybody does get through it. We're trying to customize it. We get a lot better buy-in with people when we individualize treatment and customize treatment, when people feel like we really care about them rather than just putting people through a cookie cutter. But one of the problems with individualizing treatment is it's harder to answer some of your questions. Like when you ask, like, well, when is this guy going to get done? it's harder to say, oh, well, for sure, all they do is these 5 assignments and then they're done. And so, because we're trying to individualize this stuff a little bit. And I think the research supports the individualized treatment because it's possible for, if you look at this list again, it's possible for 3 different people to be high risk in the same group and not even have the same predictors. It's possible for guys to be in there. And so a cookie cutter program isn't even efficient for treating risk. We have to be, we have to be pretty customizable in being able to do that. And we played around with like, well, maybe we'll put guys with a lot of child sexual interest in one group and then guys with adult stuff in different groups. We haven't really pulled the trigger on that. Frankly, there's not a lot of research that supports that. The research suggests that guys can benefit from treatment regardless of whether their groups are heterogeneous or not. So, okay, that's some of the thought. So real quick, some of you guys don't care about this. I could talk about this all day, but there were several questions where you guys were asking like, how do you make these determinations? How does this work? So you guys are asking for it. So if you're bored by it, I apologize. But there are several different types of risk we're looking at. And this is where it creates a lot of the confusion when I have parents and family members call me up. They're like, well, my son says that he's high risk, but what does that mean? So the first type is called static risk. So this is risk that looks at historical information, things that don't really change. Like, for instance, guys that have a history of convictions for violent offenses are at a higher risk. Guys that are younger are at a higher risk of reoffending than older guys. Guys that, anyway, some of these types of things. So the exciting thing about static risk is it's really easy to do. It's something that you can do based on just historical information. I quite often will have a family member call me up and say, you guys have never assessed, and that's not necessarily true. There are different types of assessments that we do. The most predictive assessment that we have, the static 99, is based on historical information. Everybody on our wait list has a risk assessment done. And we use it as like a baseline for a lot of our risk and decision making. And before we put them into group, we'll come in and do some other assessments to make sure that we're right and to make sure that we're getting all of the details to create the treatment plan. But I have, I'll show you in a second, I have about 1,400 people on our wait list, and we have risk assessments on all of those people. We have them, based on the first week that they come in there. Once we identify them, we do a risk assessment on them and then put them on a trajectory of kind of where we think that's happening. So the benefits of static risk is it predicts better than any of the other assessments we have. One of the things that's bad about it is it doesn't change. So that means a guy will start treatment at high risk, and then let's say he does amazing in treatment, and let's say he takes it seriously and reduces all of his risk. At the end, he's still high risk because whether or not you are involved in treatment doesn't change whether you have a history of violence. It doesn't change whether or not you have a male victim. It doesn't change some of these things that are predictors of sex offending. So that's one of the things that is like that's why we don't use the static alone. It gives us a good baseline and it's a good snapshot for what we would expect risk to be at the time of release, but it doesn't change. And so because of that, it only has some limited use. This risk assessment I was talking about a second ago, the Stable 2007, it uses what we call dynamic risk. These are behavioral and personality tendencies that are pretty stable, but they can change with a lot of effort. So these are these areas here that like impulsivity, like anger towards women, right? So I'm pretty impulsive. I've been working on it for a long time and I got a little better, but I'm not very much better. So it takes a lot of effort to change in some of these areas, and they tend to not change without a lot of intervention. And so these are the areas that we're going to make our treatment plans about, is this dynamic risk. And when we're writing letters to the board telling them whether or not we think they've made progress in treatment, it's this dynamic risk that we're really taking a look at, whether or not they've done some of these things. And the research suggests that people can change, but probably not super fast. So if someone's like, I'm in treatment for 3 months and now I'm better, The research suggested that that's probably an unrealistic thing to expect, and it's probably not true that someone can like make incredibly, I mean, maybe some people do, but generally people don't make, generally it takes a year or so to make the type of risk, the type of change that we sort of want to see in some of these areas. And then the last area is what we call acute risk. So these are changeable factors that may happen immediately. We don't do this in the prison because all of the 7 items on the acute are mostly based for community living. But these are things like if you have a guy that's generally low risk and then suddenly his wife dies or his mom dies, that would be what we consider an acute risk factor. And that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to offend right there, but this is something that we probably need to address or change. And right now, I have just trained all of AP&P on these acute risk factors. And I'm hoping in the future, so if you're looking at change that I'm going to be predicting over the next year or two, I'm really hoping in the future that a lot of these parole violations are going to be connected to risk relevant areas. A lot of times parole officers, I mean, a lot of them are getting trained right now. I'm actually really proud of what we've been doing in Utah about training a lot of these people, but I still will see parole violations that aren't connected to risk whatsoever. And they'll be writing to the board like, this guy has a sex offense, we need to send him back to prison. And I'll look at it, I'm like, I would not be sending them to prison based on this. So hopefully in the next year or two, they can have some better risk variables that can help justify when this person is having these kind of acute issues that probably need to justify prison, or maybe can be used for graduated sanctions or some kind of other thing that's going on. So we're not there yet, but hoping in the next year or two we can start making parole violations with a little bit of research foundation. Because as you saw right now, we have a lot of guys that are coming back to prison for things that like missing too many treatment dates, which I want them to go to treatment. They've been asked to go to treatment. They should go to treatment. I don't think sending someone back to prison because you missed too many treatment is probably an effective use of our resources. And it probably didn't help much for them either. So I'm hoping to adjust this a little bit. So maybe if I come back next year, I could be really excited and tell you about all of the changes we've made to parole violations. I've certainly spent a lot of time looking at our research and focusing and training different people on how to do this. So I'm excited about that. Okay, so these are the recommended treatment dosages for risk levels. I didn't write this. These are recommendations from the people that wrote the Static 99 and the Stable 2007. So this is mostly like industry standard. I don't know if you guys remember, some of you have been around and remember this. A couple of years ago, we were refusing to treat low-risk guys in the prison, and we were recommending community treatment for this low-risk population. And this is the reason why we were making this decision, is because all the research is suggesting that these guys are reoffending at rates of between 1% and 3%, not very far off of the rate of criminal non-sex offenders. And so the recommendations that we're getting from the research is to really not do very much treatment with them. The problem is the political environment in Utah doesn't really allow for a decision like that. The Board of Pardons is uninterested in releasing guys without treatment. So last year, one of the first things that I did when I became director is we started treating low-risk guys. One of the things that was happening is because the Board of Pardons was uninterested in releasing them, we were kind of having our program and the Board of Pardons was kind of playing a game of chicken, where we were saying like, we don't want to treat these guys. The research says we shouldn't be treating them. And then the board's like, well, look at their crime. Their crime was like really heinous. So we're not taking the chance here. We're not releasing these guys without treatment. And then I realized that we were actually harming these individuals because they were doing longer time in prison than they would have if we just treated them. And so we created a low-risk treatment program. And the low-risk treatment program is our Building Resilience program, which is basically the protective factors program. And I felt like, well, if I was going to do treatment with someone that would do the least amount of harm to them, then I would just do a program where it said, this is how you build relationships and this is how you cope with your issues. It's all like a forward momentum. They call it positivist approach-oriented psychology. So if any of your loved ones fall on that low recidivism area, we'll have them do a 6-month pre-treatment program. We'll have them do a 3-month protective factors program, and then we'll probably tell the Board of Pardons that they've completed treatment. And that's kind of what it is. And also like some of our locations are doing our pre-treatment twice a week. So it's really, some of them can do it in 3 months pre-treatment and 3 months with our protective factors, with maybe 6 months total. And then we'll tell the Board of Pardons we're done with that. So then our average risk guys, this is kind of how we broke it down into these 2 top categories. We're considering our low risk guys, this average risk group, and then we have our above average and well above average. And this is kind of the recommendations here. For the average is maybe 100 hours of treatment or intervention. And what that ends up looking like is the 3 to 6 months of pre-treatment, and then maybe 9 months of, between 8 and 9 months of core treatment, including the Building Resilience program as part of that 8 to 9 months. And then we have this high-risk program, and we're expecting, maybe double to triple the amount of hours we expect them to do. I had to make a decision last year because I had to look at our resources, and I had to look at what we could kind of do and what was kind of fair to the guys going through the program. And I think you could make a program long, or you could make a program fat. And we decided to make our high-risk program a little longer, but mostly just much wider. So what I mean by that is with our average risk guys, they're going to treatment twice a week, and they're doing groups that are about an hour and a half, and then they're doing individual sessions, maybe 2 times a month, 1 to 2 times a month is their individual sessions. And then our high-risk guys, they're going to groups twice a week, but they're doing 2-hour groups, and they're doing double the amount of individual treatment. So then I can show that in a relatively similar amount of time, they're able to do the amount of hours that are being recommended for someone that are kind of happening. And there's kind of 2 different ways of looking at this. So I show you this at great personal risk, because what's going to happen is all of you are going to come back and be like, well, my son was in treatment for this amount of time, and you were recommending this kind of thing. And that would be true in many of these cases. There's kind of 2 ways of looking at risk reduction. One is these are recommended dosage hours, but also the analogy that I like to use is you could put a steak in the oven or put a steak on the grill, and you could put a timer for 15 minutes, but you only serve the steak when it's done, right? The 15 minutes doesn't mean it's done. So I could take that steak off and I could cut it open. It's raw in the middle. And I'm not going to say, hey, you have to eat this steak. It was in the oven for 15 minutes. And we do this with a lot of guys. Like we'll put them in treatment for, the 100 hours. We'll look at them on the other side, and they have a ton of risk. And I'll say, I can't just write to, the public and say, well, they were here for 100 hours. We think they're still risky, but whatever, let's just roll the dice. Like we can't necessarily do that. So because of that, there might be some cases where we'll do some follow-up care, because at the end, there were still some concerning behaviors or some concerning risk areas that we want to treatment. In some of these cases, we can show some reduction, and we just throw that out to the community anyway. We could say we still know that there is some risk, and the risks are in these areas, but we really hope treatment in the community can handle that. But if we don't complete them, the Board of Pardons will not release them. In fact, there was new legislation that just passed that tried to legislatively mandate that if we don't complete them, that the Board of Pardons cannot release them. And some of that language was rolled back, so the Board of Pardons still has ability to release them. But the general public, well, at least some of the legislators right now, they do not want these guys released without treatment being completed. So we have to find ways of completing treatment and finding ways that that's kind of happening there. Okay, so we put this handy dandy chart together. I don't know if it helps or hurts. I didn't write it. So every time I look at it, I think it might hurt. But this is the pathway to how to get people out of prison through sex offense stuff. So we start out with, your conviction or sentencing. And then, of course, when they come to us, it's because they came to prison. Although, Molly was on the sex offense task force for a number of years, and I'm currently the co-chair of the task force. So I'm also like responsible for writing a lot of the policy for people that are on probation also. So we still have that effect. But most of the people that are under my purview come to prison. So then the first step for completing treatment and doing parole is their assessment. Like I said, there's two different stages for their assessment. The first stage is to do the historical work with the static 99, and then the second one is when a therapist meets with them and does the follow-up. It's usually an hour, hour and a half with the stable 2007. And then I would say 90% of the time, maybe even 95% of the time, the risk area that we predicted is where they are. But sometimes, like for instance, if someone's kind of on the fence between low and average risk, and then we do the stable and their score is a little high on the stable, it bumps them up to the average risk. So we have to be pretty careful because sometimes they'll be like, well, you're kind of slated for the low risk treatment. And then when we get in there, we're like, well, actually, we're going to put you on the average risk treatment. And some guys get really mad about that. It's almost like they feel like I promised them like 3 months of treatment and then they really did a year of treatment. And sometimes they're really mad about that. So we try to be really careful. Like we're not exactly sure. So sometimes family members will call me up and be like, well, where's my son going to go? And we had a pretty good idea. We're 95% right because of this first assessment, but we actually haven't gone in and done the other hour and a half assessment. So after that assessment process, we have a pretty good idea of where they are. So, but also because guys are in prison for a very long time, it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to just treat them based on when they came to prison. We really do have a priority. We try to get the people that have the best ability to get out of prison first. So if someone has a board hearing, for next year, they're probably going to be on the top of our priority list to be putting in. And so I had a family member call me up last week and said, my son's sitting in Elm in CUCF and he keeps getting skipped over. And they were like really mad at me, like, why is my son getting skipped over? And what I think is happening in this man's mind is he's sitting in a section and he thinks that the list is when you got to the section. And so then we'll have someone that gets into the section after him and then into the program before him. And then he's mad because he feels like he's getting skipped over. But if I have a 1,300 list, that's really my list. And the guys that's getting into the program might be number 14 on the list, and he might be number 30 on the list. So he's not getting skipped over. He just has a really limited view of where that is. It doesn't make any sense for me to skip a guy that could get out of prison to put a guy that won't get out of prison anytime soon in the program. So we have to prioritize the guys that could actually get to the program. Now I have a dream that we will be so far ahead of the list that I can just put whoever I want in. And we are not there right now. And I'll show you why we're not there right now. One of the reasons we're not there right now is because the Board of Pardons changed the way they do hearings. So back in the day, and some of you have family members that went to prison 10 years ago or more, back in the day, the Board of Pardons would have a two-hearing, I don't know what they called it, but they had a two-hearing policy. And they had where you would do your minute, because you know how in Utah we have indeterminate sentencing. So you would have like 0 to 5 years in prison, or 1 to 15, or 3 to life, or something like that. You have that minimum amount that you have to do before the board can even release you. And that's not what I'm talking about matrix, because matrix is recommended, but there's a certain amount that the board it's kind of required for you to do. So back in the day, the board you'd go to prison and they would set your original hearing for your minimum. So if you have a 5 to life, you would be almost guaranteed to do 5 years in prison before the board would even meet with you. And then at 5 years, the board would meet with you and then determine how long they want to keep you and whether or not they want to recommend treatment for you at that time. And then our policy at that time was to because we didn't know if you're on 5 to life, the board may say, oh, we're actually going to release you at 6 years. The board could say we're going to release you at 30 years. So we actually don't know when you're going to be released. And I actually have no idea where you are on my priority list. So for a long time, based on the old system, we would wait for the board to kind of give us a timeline for you before we would even put you on our wait list. And now the board has changed to what they call smart scheduling. And I actually think smart scheduling is named right. I think it is smart. Instead of like 2 hearings, I don't know if you guys remember like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, the board was behind like 3 months or like 4 months. And it was because they're doing twice as many hearings as they have to have. So the board went to a 1 hearing smart scheduling. So the board said, well, we know within like, right when you get into prison, like kind of how long we want you to do. So then the board is now decided to start immediately just ordering treatment or immediately start giving us a pretty good idea of when you're going to do. The problem is we call it, oh, yeah, I'm kind of ahead of myself. Yeah, I'm kind of ahead of myself. I'm calling it the 2 bucket model. Is we have all these guys that have been in prison for 20 years, 10 years that are still on this old model. And now we have a whole bunch of new guys that are getting scheduled under smart scheduling. And they're actually, whereas before we were like getting a steady stream of orders from the Board of Pardons with 1 bucket, now we're getting 2 buckets at the same time. And what that's done for us is it has exploded our wait list. Our wait list went from about 700 or 800 3 years ago to about 1,400. So we effectively doubled our wait list. And I want you guys to take a guess at how many therapists they gave us to deal with this problem. 0 extra therapists. So we have the same amount of people that we've dealt with, but we have twice as many people to sort of deal with in the thing. So anyway, I'll get to that in a second, but that's just really important to know right here. Like sometimes so right now it's especially confusing because I'll have someone that, like a parent that will call me up and say, my son goes to the Board of Pardons next month and he hasn't even started treatment. What's wrong with you guys? And I'll look at him and I'll be like, well, he's actually under the old system. So he actually hasn't even been identified for treatment yet. So he actually has to go to this first hearing, and then the board's going to tell us how long he's going to be, and then we put him on our wait list. But then we have a whole bunch of new guys where their first hearing is their only hearing. And so we have to get them done with treatment before that time. And so because of that, it really depends. So if you guys are confused about whether we have to get treatment done by their hearing or not, it really depends on whether they came to prison like 7, 8 years ago, or they came to prison like 3 years ago. And that will really change kind of where they are on our tracking list. Because really, we have, taken a risk sometimes and, taken a guy and been like, well, this guy's been in prison for a long time. Let's see if we can get him done in treatment before his board hearing. And then the board will meet with him and be like, 15 more years. And in that case, what we did is we took a guy and treated him, and then the board's going to expect us to treat him again in 15 years. And then we took a space up for a guy that's going to be released next year that probably should have gotten into treatment first. So it really messes our list up when we don't kind of follow the board. We don't kind of know where the board is expecting to release guys. And then there was a question that someone asked about, well, why do you wait to the end of their prison sentence rather than like put them in treatment at the beginning of the prison sentence? And that's one of the reasons, is because we really don't know when they're released. So we don't even know whether, I'll show you the thing in a minute. We actually do have the status list that I have, which is our expire life sentence list. I have a list of about 75 guys that the board says we have no interest in releasing at all. And sometimes the board will meet with the guy that has a possible release date and then just change them to expire life sentence. And then if that's the case, then like I said, my dream is to get so efficient and so far ahead of this that we can put people in treatment and we don't even matter whether our space is. But we actually can't do that this year. We probably can't do that next year. This year and next year, it's a mad race to get people done by their board hearings. That's kind of where they are. So the only other part about this chart is if we've identified their hearing date, we usually try to get them started in treatment a couple of years before their hearing date. We're actually getting closer to the hearing date than I want right now, but in a perfect world, they might start treatment maybe 2.5, 3 years before their hearing date, so we can give them ample time. I actually wouldn't mind starting them earlier than that, and I think in the future we're going to try really hard to start them as early as possible. I've actually removed all the barriers. If we had the space we put people in, if we had the space, we put everybody in. And I kind of removed all of our like artificial barriers. We're not actually saying you can't put someone in until this time. If we have pretty good reasons that they're going to benefit, we will, but just not right now because we're drowning when it comes to that. Okay, this is what our wait list looks like. Just to give you a current update and to like raise my anxiety levels, I looked at our treatment list and I looked at how many people were expected to complete treatment by the end of the year. We have from today until the end of the year, we have 212 people that we have to get through treatment. And I'll show you in a second. Oh yeah, here we go. In 2023, we only graduated 163 people in the whole year. So I have more people from May on out to graduate than I did in the entire year of 2023. I think we're going to do it. I think we're kind of there. I'm also really optimistic, but we've been able to do a couple of cool things. Like I've been able to bring on a bunch of interns. I created a couple of other therapist positions out of nowhere. I've had a lot of support from UDC. I've been like telling them about this problem for a long time. We actually didn't really get to grow the program very much for decades, and now they're starting to listen to us, and we've created like 4 or 5 new positions in the last year. So I'll show you in a second. We're actually like treating way more people than we have been in the past. And I think we've gotten a little bit more efficient, so we've gotten better at it. But like I said, our current wait list as of today is 1,367. We have 251 people on our removed or refused list. And I was telling Molly at the beginning of this, Molly likes to tell people, if you got a problem, you need to talk to your son, because I had 2 parents call me last week and they were like, what's wrong with you? Why isn't my son in treatment? And then we talked to the son and he's like, screw you, I don't want to be in treatment. And I was like, you gotta tell your parents that. They think it's our fault. But like we like write them letters and ask them to be in. And a lot of people will say, I'd rather do all my time than come into treatment. So that's not everybody. I have, almost 1,400 people waiting on the wait list, and I have 251 that are either been removed for drugs or sexual misconduct or violence or something like that. Also, we've removed all of the barriers. It used to be that we would say, if you're removed, you have to be out for 180 days or something like that. And we removed all of that. Like we can individually look at whether someone's ready and put them in treatment earlier. And also, we're trying to do new things, because it used to be that if someone got kicked out of therapy, it might take them a year to get back in. And I'm trying to do like maybe treatment suspensions instead of removals. Like if there was a big issue, we can maybe remove them for a month and then try to get them back to where they were, to still see if we could still kind of preserve some of that treatment momentum that we have. We're trying to do a lot of things to make it so that we don't, because I just don't think it's good for us to remove someone and then extend their prison sentence a lot because of something that maybe they could fix and put back in. So we have recently, within the last 6 months, removed all of the artificial barriers to getting someone back into treatment, as far as that goes. So like I said before, this is the list that makes me sad. I have 74 people on my expire life sentence list. And these are guys that every 5 years, the board gets to look at them, and they can write something to the board, and the board gets to relook at their case. And sometimes they'll change the expire life sentence list. But these are guys that we take them off our wait list because, if we don't have, but then I actually had some conflict with the Board of Pardons recently, because one of these guys went up to ask the board to relook at the case. And the board said, well, we're not going to look at your case because you haven't completed treatment. And then they blamed me. Well, like, you didn't put me in treatment. And then I went back to the board and I said, well, were you really willing to release this guy? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, well then just be honest with them. Like, don't tell them you release them if we treat them. So then because of that, we've changed our policies a little bit. Like if we have a guy that's coming up on, if the board gives us any inclination that they'd review his case, we're willing to like kind of throw them in treatment and kind of do a thing. Whereas before, if you were on this expire life sentence list, we wouldn't do any treatment with you. But I'm starting to think like, especially because the board is kind of blaming us a little bit for it. And I'm like, well, we'll at least treat you. And then if the board says no, then it's up to them and not us. I don't want to personally be responsible for someone staying in prison longer than they have to. based on a technicality, if we can put them in. So it hasn't happened very much, but I think on 2 different occasions, we put a guy on the expire life sentence list in treatment because we had some kind of inclination the board would be willing. In both of those cases, the board did not release them. So, okay. This is just a little bit of to show you maybe some of the growth we've had since 2023. So we've had a lot of challenges. We've been able to increase a lot of bed space. One of the things we've done is we've increased the treatment beds in Gunnison in Central Utah Correctional Facility. We now have 2 full-time therapists there. We're trying to hire a third one. We actually interviewed for one, but we weren't able to give them the job. It's actually very hard for me to get a therapist in Gunnison. I have an open position. So if any of you know of a therapist that needs a job and is willing to work in Gunnison, I could probably hire them right now. I'd be really happy about it. But we've also expanded at several county jails. We started treatment in Beaver County Jail, and we've expanded in several different places. So our total graduation numbers in 2023 was 163. And last year in 2025, we were able to do more than 100 graduations more than that. I'm hoping to be over 300 right now. If I don't graduate like 325 people this year, then people are going to miss their board dates. So we have to create more. And so we've brought on new positions. We've been able to create new intern positions. We've grown in the county jails. We've done a lot of different things to show growth in these areas and so what I'm really hoping and trying to predict is that we're going through our hardest year right now. And then maybe next year will be kind of hard. And then we'll be so far ahead that maybe in 2 years, when I'm talking to you guys, I'll be like, we're putting everybody in. Our wait list is 4 people. But that is not where we are right now. My wait list is double what it was in 2023. So as you can see, some of our biggest growth areas is in 2023, we had 0 people graduating Gunnison. We had 1 in 2024, and then we had almost 50 in 2025. So that was a big growth area. Also, you can see a growth area in the county jails. We graduated, about 20 to 30 more people in the county jails. But then we also had huge growth numbers in our main facility in Green in the Salt Lake category. So I'm pretty happy with these numbers. It was really interesting because I was talking to our therapists and they were like, their heads are spinning. They're like, this has been a crazy year. And I'm like, yeah, we did. We're doing almost double what we were doing 2 years ago. So yeah. And like I said, some of you are still frustrated with us and you have a good reason to be frustrated with us. We are probably closer to being right at the edge than we've ever been, even though we're like almost doubling our capacity. So that's just kind of where it's like a weirdest thing of I look at these numbers and I'm like really proud of the growth we've done. And also I feel like we're drowning at the same time. So that's kind of where we are. So that's a fun feeling to have for us. Okay, we've already talked about smart scheduling. Okay, so yeah, we talked about this, how to tell when someone is coming into treatment. We talked about, that's the first question. If one of you call me up and is mad at me, we're going to look, are you on the old system or are you on smart scheduling? Also, we're going to have to look, there's a couple other things, where are you on our tracker? Are you on our not flagged list? Are you on our refused list? Where are you kind of on this type of thing? And just to show you, I did a presentation last month for the mental health thing, and I said our wait list was 1342, and now our wait list is what? 1367. So that's what I'm saying. In just a month, even though we're graduating people, we're 40 people higher on our wait list. It's like growing. It's like gremlins, right? You can't get them wet. And then our wait list is just growing and growing and growing. Okay. So here's some challenges that we're kind of facing right now. We're getting a lot of short dates from the Board of Pardons. That's really hard for us. I've met with them a couple of times and tried to tell them that they can't probably give us a shorter date or give us an idea earlier what they're going to do with someone. Because if we have assessed them as high risk and the board's like, we want to see him in 9 months, then that guy's going to not be done by his date. And so I've asked the board kind of not to sort of do that to us, but we're still getting a lot of short date. Another thing is, the Board of Pardons tends to focus on crime details ahead of risk. And that's what I said right at the beginning. There's there's kind of high impact crimes and then there's like low risk of doing that crime. And so the board really focuses on these high impact crimes. So there'll be so for instance, some of these guys that sexually offended their own children but had a generally stable life, if you read their crime, it's pretty horrifying. Sometimes the crime they did was pretty extensive and had a lot of problems. And then when we do our risk assessments, they actually don't have a lot of predictors for risk. So we'll write to the Board of Pardons saying, this guy's kind of low risk, you can consider releasing them. But then they'll read the case and they'll be like, but did you read it? This guy did really horrible things. So the board is really, and it's not just the board, victim advocate groups, legislators in Utah. Sometimes that's really difficult to wrap your head around, a guy that's statistically not likely to do something, but then what he did was pretty horrific. And so it's not common, but it's common enough that it bothers some of us, where we'll treat a guy and write a low risk report to the board, and then the board will give them like another 3 or 4 years on a rehearing. And then when I asked the board, I'm like, well, did you read our report? And they were like, we did read your report, but what happened was really bad, and victim advocates are really unhappy with this case, and so we're just going to give them some more time. So I'm trying to work with the board to maybe I actually have several Board of Pardons members coming to a risk assessment training that I'm doing, so we can at least be on the same level. But they're trying to help me understand that risk is good, but it's not everything. There are other areas that they're looking at when making determinations about whether to release someone. And so I've grown in my respect for their decision making, but still, that's why we have different areas that we're looking at, the Board of Pardons and us. We're looking at risk, and a lot of times they're looking at crime details. So indeterminate sentencing dates and long prison sentences really complicates our ability to get this stuff done, and it compounds a lot of your guys' frustrations when you look at it. And also treatment locations. If anyone has a lot of mental health issues or any health problems, sometimes I can't get treatment to them. Like if they're in the mental health unit in Salt Lake in Current, we've sent some interns in to start doing treatment for them. But I had a couple of caseworkers reach out to me last week and said, how can we get treatment for this guy? And I said, well, can we move him to Green? And they said, oh no, this guy's not stable enough to move to Green. And then I'm like, well, I don't know how I'm going to provide treatment for it. I don't have just 1,000 therapists that can go do individual therapy for a guy, that's in there. And so that is a problem. Or, the most acute behavioral problems, we have to have them in Salt Lake. And so I might have treatment beds open in a county jail, but I can't get a guy to them, and that's why, so I have all of my beds. Getting someone into Salt Lake is the most difficult thing for me. Getting someone into county jail is the easiest thing for me. But if anyone has any behavioral problems or mental health issues, I can't get them into treatment. And so I had a guy that I tried to move into treatment, and then he became suicidal and then wrote a grievance that I didn't get him into treatment. Oh, because I tried to move him to a county jail. That's why he was in Salt Lake. And I tried to move him to a county jail. And then he wrote a grievance saying, well, why aren't you putting me in treatment? And I said, well, I had a treatment bed for you, but you refused to go. So we actually consider, if I try to put someone in a county jail and they refuse, we consider it a treatment refusal, and I put them on my refusal list, because I sometimes don't have the bed space in Green to put a person that I can put in a county jail. And then the person will say to me, well, you don't understand, the county jails are so expensive. And that's one of the challenges that I have right now that's on my list to do, is trying to work with the county jails to make visiting easier, or it less expensive, because it is really difficult for me. By the way, the legislature has had a decision this year to either move funding for a new prison, even though we just built a prison, or try to find some creative ways to do treatment. And one of the things that they've decided is to prioritize treatment in county jails and to expand treatment in Gunnison. And that was their kind of fix for overpopulation. So because of that, I have to kind of prioritize those places as treatment beds. So if I have people, so I often will have family members call me up and say, Jared, please, 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 please don't send my son to a county jail. But there is a significant amount of legislative pressure for me to fill up the county jails first, and I have beds open. And so I can't move a guy that's in, a medical housing unit in Salt Lake to a county jail. So sometimes all I can do is move these guys in there. And I understand that that puts pressure on family members, but sometimes I have a decision about whether to have someone get treatment completed this year or wait 2 years for treatment completion. And I tend to think that you guys would rather see your family members a year early. So I'll sometimes put them on a list to IPP, knowing that they won't have jobs and knowing that like things will be a little bit more expensive. And I apologize about that, but that's really is the direction that the system is going right now. Is the Utah legislature doesn't want to put in $1 billion more into building another treatment facility. So the current Band-Aid patch is to expand treatment in county jails. And so if some of your loved ones end up there, I really apologize, but I do have more open beds there and we can get treatment there quicker. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we're moving in that direction. Okay, I talked about this a little bit, but these are the different treatment groups. And this is kind of the biggest growth area that we've done in the last year. So I told you before, our groups are broken down by risk level, and I've explained that. But we have these other risk groups that we're doing. We have programs for people with lower intellectual functioning. Right now, we're doing what's called a Footprints program, and we have a program going in our current facility and one in Green, and we tend to try to get wherever that is. So it's just written at a lower reading level. It tries to use less abstract terms for different things like that, but we do have a program for people with intellectual disabilities. There's a lot of misnomers about our female program. I don't know if you guys are surprised to hear this. There are just fewer females that have sex crimes than men. And so I really can only do about a group a year. This is another program. So this is kind of the weird thing about females with sex offenses. In general, their recidivism rates are very low. About between 1% and 3%. They recidivate at the same level as our lowest risk males. In fact, they recidivate at the same level as men that aren't sex offenders. So every man has a risk of being arrested for a sex crime, and women sex offenders have about the same risk as a man that's not a sex offender. We call that the desistance level. So because of that, several years ago, we were telling the Board of Pardons it's kind of a waste of their time and a waste of our time to provide a lot of treatment for them. But the board came back and said, look, especially like I said before, the political climate in Utah is that the board really can't release people without us providing treatment. So a year ago, we started treating women again, and we did a female group, and we have the same kind of problem with treatment. There's actually no sex offense programs written for women because they recidivate at such low rates, we actually don't really know what are identifiable risk factors for them. So the program that we run is a Good Lives model program, which is an approach oriented, like how to have good relationships, how to cope with your struggles and anger. And it's like all these like kind of like move forward type things. But I keep getting like one of the questions was, why don't you treat women? And the answer is we do treat women. We just don't have enough. We're actually going to start a program, another group for women, I think next week or maybe the week after that. And I have maybe 8 women that qualify for that group. And then we actually don't have any other women that are going to have hearing dates until like 2028 or 2029 after that. So I really, really can only, so I'm dedicated to providing a group a year over in Dell. And anyone that's within the next couple of years that's getting released from prison, we're going to put them in. And I think that's kind of what it is. But so this is one of the problems with our female group is because we only have enough women to provide a group once a year. If the women have like fewer chances, so they really need to make the highest use of it. We had 3 women fail out of our group last year. And then, after they failed out, so they got locked down and they fought, they had a bunch of issues and they had a bunch of disciplinaries, and then they were like not able to come to our group and finish it. And then for the rest of the year, they just kept writing me letters like, when's the next group going to start? When's the next group going to start? I'm like, I don't know, maybe May of next year. And so then I told them like, we're going to do this group and you can't punch someone right before that group. You have to go in and finish it. because I can't just start another group right after that. And so that's what I'm trying to tell the women over there. But we have one lady there that has a parole date or a board hearing, like I think in October. And then I have one in December, then the rest are like 2027, 2028. So I think we're still like ahead on the women, but we've started that. Also, our CSEM only. So CSEM stands for Child Sexual Exploitation Material, also child porn. So it's a different population, and this is another group that a couple of years ago we were not doing treatment for. We were not doing treatment for the CSEM only guys, and we are now. We have a different curriculum. It's between 6 and 9 months, and it's specifically for this. The research suggests that these guys have different risk factors than other ones, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to put them in the same group together. So we are now doing groups for them individually. But frankly, most of these guys get out on probation and don't come to prison. We only have enough to kind of run one group a year also with this population. Even though this is, if I hate to talk about it like it's a growth, but the area that we're seeing, more sex offenses happening is in this area. Every year there's more and more guys that are getting convicted for child porn only kind of charges. And then I talked already, so I won't waste time talking about what I want to do with parole violators. We're going to start, we do run a parole violator group, but we're hoping to get that moved to the halfway house so that we can keep people from coming back to prison. Because it is, 272 people last year. If we're talking about prison beds not being able to that's an easy way of keeping our beds empty, or at least clearing bed space in the prison, if we can find alternative ways for parole violators to get help and treated rather than come back to prison. Although I think about 20% of those guys probably should have come back to prison, and I would be supportive of those guys coming back to prison. So, okay, yeah, we talked about this already. I just didn't have a thing. We have our low risk program. I already told you what we were doing with that. Our standard risk program, I already told you what we were doing with that, and our high risk program. So, okay, that is all my prepared material. I know that there were about 20 questions that I didn't cover. So I did about an hour. I hopefully covered the majority of the questions that you have. So I don't know, Molly, if you want to look at some of the questions that have come in and then maybe throw a couple at me, and I'll see if I can cover some of them.
I will be happy to do that. There are several. A couple people are wanting to know how to reach you. Do you want them to email you? Do you want to give out a phone number? How do you want to answer
Yeah,
that one?
reaching me by email is probably, yeah, like I was saying, what is the likelihood that I'm going to get back to you?
Well, how about if I answer? It's much easier to reach you by email.
It is much easier to reach me by email. Yeah, you could probably just email me at the jaredhill@utah.gov. Yeah, I think I'll try to answer everybody. But like one of the things so I'm just kind of making a promise to myself. When family members reach out to me, one of the biggest frustrations is I don't have like uh, an ROI. I don't have a release of information signed. So sometimes I'll hear on the one end, like, here's all the things that are going on. And then I'll look at all the information on my end. I'm like, I can't tell you any of this stuff. So that ends up being a frustrating conversation for both of us. Then it's kind of like, that's why I'm just going to use the Molly Prince thing. If I say to you, I think you should talk to your son about this, it's because I have reason to believe that there's a lot more to the story that you're probably not hearing. And I believe that there are problems that happen in the prison. I believe that people get removed for things that aren't right. And I believe that officers are mean and things are getting set up. But I think that it happens far less often than a lot of parents think. I think most of the time, the majority of the time, if your son got removed from treatment, it's because he did something stupid. It's because he punched someone, or he did some drugs, or he did something, or he was acting out sexually. Those are usually the main things that are going to cause us to kind of remove somebody. And if someone, but I don't mind looking someone up on the list and just making sure that we're on the same page, because there are times, one of my least favorite things that happens is this happens more often like in the county jails, where I'll put in a move request for somebody, and then for whatever reason it doesn't happen, and then I like don't know that the move request kind of didn't happen and the guy never showed up and it never really happened, and then I'll have a family member reach out and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this guy's been sitting in the county jail for 4 months and now he's gonna miss his date. I hate that stuff. Frankly, it's happened, a half dozen times this year. It doesn't happen. I mean, on a 1,400 person waitlist, it's going to happen occasionally. It doesn't happen as much as I fear that it will. But if you guys are like worried that your loved one is stuck somewhere, I have no problem looking them up on the tracker and at least sending in some more move requests and things like that. It should be easy for me to move someone from one place to another place. It is not. And it often takes a considerable amount of time and effort to move someone from one place to another place, especially if I have a guy that's not being very cooperative to move to a location that he doesn't want to go to. That's why we consider some of those moves refusals, because I can't do the system if that happens. Did I answer the question, Molly, or no?
Sure, thank you. There's another question. I'm going to just go back. Why might AP&P recommend that an offender not participate in SOTP while incarcerated? This sounds like a pre-sentence thing, not necessarily a based on risk assessments, but I'll let you answer it.
Well, I mean, I'm just shooting in the dark because I don't know details of what you're asking. This happens occasionally. So, for instance, if there's any time we don't recommend treatment or AP&P, so AP&P probably shouldn't be making treatment recommendations. We probably should be, asking, licensed providers to do that. And I've seen a couple, like, so there's someone in a treatment provider somewhere in the state that I keep disagreeing with their decisions. This person keeps saying this person doesn't need treatment, and then when I look over the risk assessment, I'm thinking I think the person's riskier than you say they are, and we would be recommending treatment. So that happens sometimes. Also, like, there are some crimes that are technically sexual in nature but aren't considered sex crimes according to the research. So for instance, like revenge porn, if we think that the motivation for revenge porn was non-sexual, we recommend treatment for that. Like if we think there's some, like, so for instance, if there's a guy that has schizophrenia and he's like bathing in a public park, he might get a lewdness charge, but we don't think that's sexual in nature. And so we won't recommend treatment for that. So there are a lot of situations that we don't recommend treatment for, even if they are convicted of a sex crime. Almost often it goes the opposite way than what you're saying, where we're making treatment recommendations and then family members are upset saying, well, we think he's not that risky. Can you please, like, I had 3 family members last week ask me, can you just write a letter to the Board of Pardons saying he doesn't need treatment at all? And I said, well, no, we looked at his risk assessment and he does have stuff that needs to be treated. And, the board's just not going to release him without treatment. It's just not going to happen. So we're going to throw him in. And, we have some justification for throwing him in treatment. So, but if you want to give me more specifics about a case, send me an email about it and I'll look it up and probably answer. If not, I'm just shooting in the dark about different cases.
That makes sense. So maybe Vicky is the one that asked this. Maybe Vicky email him with your specific situation. Because my experience as a therapist reading PSIs was AP&P would make recommendations and they didn't have risk assessment information. So that might be one of the reasons. The next question is, and I don't know if you can answer this one, but how does the board react to people who deny their crime but successfully complete the program?
Yeah, of course the board doesn't like it. I mean, I don't think anyone likes it. Therapists don't like it. Nobody likes it. I'm certainly trying to educate them a little bit more to understanding what that is. I think it's probably more likely if the board was on the fence about whether to keep someone in prison, denial is probably one of the things that the board is going to use to kind of do that. But I've had guys success. I mean, most of the therapists that work for me are savvy enough that when they write the discharge summary, they focus on the risk level, the progress in treatment, and the reduction of risk that was observed. And if that's the case, if we're writing a treatment thing like that, we probably aren't highlighting denial very much in our discharge summaries, because it's possible for someone to have a successful completion, even if they don't agree with all of the aspects of their case. But I would imagine that if someone went in front of the Board of Pardons and said, I'm here, I'm innocent, release me anyway, the board struggles with that type of thing. And I've seen them release people into that circumstances, but I've also seen people get rehearings based on that. So I think if you ask the board, they'd probably say that on that alone, they probably wouldn't keep someone under that if everything else was good. But I cannot imagine that it would be helpful if that was your goal of getting released from prison.
Thank you. I think you might have explained this. I had to step away because somebody was at my door, but the question is it the same program used in the IPP jails as it is in the prisons? And you explained the different
Right.
programs.
Yeah, so I mean, it used to be that we would have all of our specialty programs in a Salt Lake prison, and then we would have just the core programs in the IPP jails. And now I just can't move people around like I want. So like in San Juan, we're doing some of our low risk programs. We're doing some of the CSEM only in San Pete. We have a lower intellectual functioning program that's working right now in Kane County, and we're trying to get some Spanish treatment in Beaver County. So we have some specialty groups that like so. I don't think any one of these jails are running all of these different programs, but we are running. So for our core program, we're running a program called Road to Freedom, and all four of those jails are running Road to Freedom. And we're also running our Building Resilience program, and all four of those jails are running our Building Resilience program. So they might be doing slightly different things, but that's because we have it kind of organized in different themes. And and unfortunately, you kind of get what you get. Like there's some jails that have a better reputation than other jails. And I had a guy the other day that I assessed him, and it looked like he was going to be a certain risk level. And I was like, well, I got to move you to this county jail. And he was like, please send me anywhere but that county jail. And I was like, that's the only place I have. Like, and I'm like, I'm really sorry about that. But, so we, right now, we have to like kind of thread the needle between doing the most effective evidence-based treatment that we can and trying to make this. If you have problems with a specific county jail, let me know. I meet with all these therapists regularly, and I've talked to about several issues that are kind of happening. If you have problems with any of our therapists, let me know. I try to be as open as I can about addressing some of these issues.
Thank you. Okay, we have lots more questions and we're running out of time. So, for the next one, it says, our son has been in 3 years now, and he says he's never been assessed and sees the board in August. Oh, she could probably email you. But can I clarify, just just because someone hasn't been seen by a therapist does not mean they were not assessed when they went in based on what you knew when they went in, correct?
Right. Like I can guarantee you that we have an assessment on him. At
Okay.
least we have the static assessment done. We
Okay.
already know where he is on the wait list. If you're worried about it, like that's what I'm saying. Like I don't know if because one of the things that I didn't say in the thing is the board will sometimes tell us we really want to consider releasing this guy. We expect you to have treatment completed by this time. But sometimes the board will say, we want you to do this other program in the meantime, and we only want a recommendation from SOTP by your board date. And so what that means is the board is saying, we actually are not going to release this guy at his board date. We actually want a recommendation to make a second decision about what's happening. So it's possible for a guy to be 3 months away from his board date and have nothing wrong with the system. And I don't mind communicating that to you once I like kind of crack into it that like, the board is actually not planning on releasing him at this time, and they really only want a recommendation for us. And he's probably already on our like assessment list to have a psychologist or someone else come in and do a full assessment of the guy. Because hopefully before they go to the board, we at least have a comprehensive risk assessment plus recommendations to send to the board. But also like in the off chance that he's, we just missed him, then I wouldn't mind hearing about it. So send me an email and I'll look him up.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the current average caseload per licensed SOTP clinician? And is that caseload considered clinically appropriate?
Is this Ernie?
No, it's not.
It sounds like an Ernie question. All right. Yeah. So is this considered clinically appropriate? Yeah. So there's a lot of research about like whether it's more appropriate to do individual treatment or group therapy. And actually, the research suggests that both of them have similar recidivism rates. So, in fact, if someone does, oh, we like to do mix in some individual therapy. It really helps us like kind of customize treatment. But we actually are based more as a group therapy model, and the research supports that they have similar recidivism rates. So I feel fine with like kind of a group heavy model. So because of that, right now, each of our therapists are running two groups that are either 8 to 10 people. And then so the clinical load is about 24 people per therapist. And between the report writing and the face-to-face hours, that's probably what we can do. We've played around with maybe going to 3 8-person groups. That's what I did for 10 years when I was at the county jail. I did 3 8-person groups. I even did 4 8-person groups for a while. 4 8-person groups is really hard with the assessment level that they have to do. Because each one of these assessments, like you did a comprehensive assessment on someone, especially with if you did an able on top of all the rest of the stuff, you're probably looking at 4 to 6 hours of assessments on top of like that's just the testing on top of all of the writing. So to get an 8-person group started takes weeks of being able to do that. So because of that, if any of these people were in the community, they might have higher caseloads than that. Our caseloads look a little bit lower than some of the community because of all of the specialized assessments and stuff. And it's probably pretty average what our therapists are doing and what we can kind of get from them. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do. We've moved to a rolling group model in the last year where it used to be that we would start 8 to 10 people and then they would all graduate at the same time. And then we would have to start another group. And that process between writing 10 discharge summaries and then 10 assessments would take us sometimes 2 to 3 months to start a new group. And we just had a lot of downtime in our program. So I switched to this rolling model where we're basically graduating one guy at a time. And it's just so much easier on a therapist to like write one discharge summary, do an effective treatment plan, an assessment on someone and put them in. And then our average like wait list has gone down and we've been able to get people into treatment quicker. So we've tried to make our model just slightly more efficient in that way. And so but because every therapist probably has 2 to 4 people on their caseload that maybe aren't doing very well in group therapy that we're just asking them to meet with individually. So that's probably why the caseload kind of comes up to maybe between, probably between 21 and 24 people.
As a clinician that did this for 30 years in the community, that's not a bad caseload. And I liked hearing that you're doing a rolling group because I found in the community, rather than having one cohort where everybody in the group is just starting, it helps to have people that have been in for a while to help the new ones. So sounds like a great plan. That's my commentary, sorry.
I like your commentary, Molly. We welcome your commentary.
All right. And you talked about the smart scheduling, so that's why some people get in sooner than others. And so how do we know if our offender is on the older new? Okay, so that's basically, you explained that as well about the smart scheduling only started about 2 or 3 years ago.
I just have to look them up. I mean, even if they talk to their case manager, I just have to look up really. I mean, you guys can't look in the system and see, but anytime you see the word original hearing, if your family member has any paperwork that says original hearing on it, they're on the old system.
Yeah.
What an original hearing means is we have no idea what to do with you. We're going to tell you at your hearing what your next hearing is. That means you've got 2 hearings. If there is not an original hearing, then there's a chance that it's on the smart scheduling system. Also, it really depends on, and when I look them up in the system, if if we're on smart scheduling, it'll say this person has an expectation to complete and participate in treatment prior to the hearing date. And
Yeah.
then that's how I know when I look it up. But like any case manager can look it up. Your family member probably has paperwork that indicates whether or not they're have an original hearing or not. They probably have that. They probably don't know what it means sometimes, and so a lot of times these guys have the information right in front of them. They just don't. And they really have.
Families can look it up on the BOP website as well.
Um,
And if they have questions, they can either email me or you.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to just throw out, I'm going to read what Albert had to say. He says, have hope. I was in prison for 15 years, was released in 2014. My family was and is my greatest support. We have learned to deal with what we have control over and try not to stress over what we cannot control. Have hope. So thank you for that, Albert.
Thanks, Albert. That was a really nice comment.
Yeah. And then Amanda asks, has Gunnison expansion increased actual treatment capacity, or has it primarily increased the number of people who can be housed while still waiting? I didn't think Gunnison expanded yet, did it?
The Gunnison had there's two different things. Like we just expanded Gunnison because we needed to start that process. So like I showed you that thing, we went from 0 2 years ago to we went from 0 to 1 to about 50 that we graduated last year. I'm really hoping that that's going to come up to about 70. Yeah, so there's two issues. We still need to hire someone, but also UDC just got a bunch of money for a Gunnison expansion.
Yeah, but that's 10 years away.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it's less than that, but there's a chance, like I asked for like 2 extra therapists, I asked for some dorm counselors and some admin staff, and I don't know when that's going to come in, but our biggest problem is just I can hire all the admin staff in I put out an applicant or I put in an ad out for admin staff and I had 75 applicants and I put out an ad for therapist and I'm not getting anybody. Well, I have interviewed some people and not offered the position because I just don't think they're going to be right with us. But we just don't have a lot of professionals in Sanpete County. And so,
It's hard down there. Yeah.
I'm really hoping that I have a therapist. Because currently, I have a therapist that lives in Payson, and she's coming down, and I have one that lives in Mapleton, and I have to do some tricky stuff like give them telework days and a couple other things to kind of trick them into coming down. And they're great therapists. I'm really happy about it. But I'm really going to try to hit the Santaquin area to say, well, it's not that bad of a drive, but like Sanpete County, I don't know. I relocated. I'm not from Sanpete County, but I live here now. I relocated to work at the Sanpete County Jail, so I'm sure I can convince someone. But I have so probably this week, I'm going to have another ad come out for a therapist down there. And then hopefully we can raise our capacity by another 24 beds down there. I'd be really happy if that happens.
Great. And Elise, I hope you got your answer. Yes, Gunnison does have a program. They're just short one of the therapists, which is what Jared's talking about. So let's see. There's another question that says, oh, okay, that's more internal stuff. Does a dismissed write-up affect tiered Oh, that's tiered housing. Okay. So are there any other questions about Oh, wait, I've got to keep scrolling. Never mind. Hang on. So what is the average risk? This is an earning question. What is the average risk you are reporting to the board? A 2023-24 sample of 50 reports had an average reported risk of 9%. I think you already answered that, but isn't it like
the question I was expecting Ernie to say?
okay.
Yeah, so I mean the average score on the static 99 is a 2. So that's going to be where the average score on the stable 2007 is a 7. And so that's kind of where people are going to go. That's what we're going to be recommending. The majority of the people, about 50% of the people we work with are going to be right in that range. We're going to have, much smaller on the below average risk range. And actually our very high risk range is going to be much smaller too. And we have, all of those bell curves of like guys that we're looking at, but that's going to be probably where we're looking at. So that's why the majority of the guys coming through the program are going to be in that average risk group. And that's why they call it average, because that's just kind of where the bell curve like kind of ends up there. And so our numbers, when we look at it, are pretty similar to the average of the national numbers. Our recidivism rates, like I think because we have such aggressive AP&P, our recidivism rates are like, if we define it as convictions for new sex crimes are actually slightly lower than the average. But then when I look at guys why they're coming back for parole violations. It actually kind of puts people. So a national average is about 7.5%. So if we have 100 guys released from prison, we would expect about 7 of them to come back for sex crimes and about 93 not to. And that's probably where Utah is. And it kind of matches the nation as a whole when we look at some of these bigger numbers. So that's kind of all of the numbers that are coming out.
Okay. Here's a question. I think it's related to the release of information that you were talking about. You don't have to talk to families. Is there a way for families to get that, or do they have to wait until their loved one's in the program?
No. If you if I can get it in a couple of different ways, but the easiest way to do it is have your loved one meet with they're called the ISP now, the individual service provider, so their case manager in the prison or the IPP manager. If they met with them and said, hey, I want to have a release of information, I just have to I can't necessarily witness the signature, so I can't probably just do it myself. But
Right.
if they met with their ISP or their IPP officer and got it signed and then it was uploaded, I could talk to you about everything. I could tell you all the stuff. And some of you went through that process and I'll have it in my tracker, there's an ROI on file. And I'm like, great. I love those phone calls. The ones I don't love are the ones where I can't tell you anything and you're worried and frustrated, and all I can say is talk to your loved one or I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jared, we can't see your face because your last slide is still up.
Oh,
I just realized that because I've been reading questions. So thank you so much for coming. We need you every year at least because things change so much.
yeah.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I'm in.
There you are. So everybody on here that needs his email found his email. Is that correct? Um,
I posted it
I
in the chat.
okay, thank you. So I want to shift gears for a second. Warren, who's on the picture waving, but his name on there is his brother-in-law is named Ernest Rogers. But Warren is our UPAN newsletter editor. He's been doing newsletters, editing them since 2014. Today is his 92nd birthday, and I think we should send everybody turn their microphones on and let's sing happy birthday to Warren. Ready? Happy
Happy
Birthday to
birthday to
you. Happy
you.
Happy
birthday to
Happy birthday
you.
to
birthday
you.
to
Happy
Happy
birthday,
Happy
birthday, dear
dear
birthday,
Warren.
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 Happy
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 birthday
birthday
to
birthday
to
to
you.
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 That was terrible. Thank you.
That was terrible.
Thank you. Yes, you're on. You're on. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the emails I've gotten and the vocal and the meeting. I apologize for not getting on, but my computer just drove me nuts. I tried to get on 12 minutes before the meeting started, and an hour and 5 or 10 minutes later, I still wasn't on. I finally had to get my brother-in-law's computer. That's why it says Ernest Rogers up there, simply because I'm out of, I'm getting too old for that kind of stuff, you know.
We're just happy that you got on and we got to sing to you and to see you because you're way out there in Florida now, and so we don't get to see you in person. But
I,
anyway, this is the amazing Warren that fits all that information into a 10-page newsletter or a 5-page newsletter, and now it will be both. So just know he's amazing. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Director
Warren.
Hill.
Thank you to all the people. Can you hear me? I don't know if
Yeah,
the
you're on.
mic's on or not, but I appreciate being part of the UPAN family. It's like a
They're
birthday
gone.
present to me to attend the meeting, and I felt like I was deprived of my
They're
birthday
gone.
present
Stop.
because I couldn't get on with my computer. I even shut it down and tried over
Maybe they can
again.
hear you. I don't know.
We can hear you.
Yeah, so anyway, I shut it down, start all over again. and still all the different links would not connect me. Just drive me nuts. So anyway, I'm recovering, and thank you for all your attention, and may we continue this good relationship. For
I
as
don't
long
see
as
you guys
possible.
too often. It's my opportunity too.
Hi, Ernie, and say hi to Audrey for us.
Okay.
Several people in the chat say happy birthday, Warren.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jane. I like your commentary to me. And Anne sent me a birthday card, and it's just been wonderful. Great group of people to be associated with. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we just want to close to quickly plug our next meeting will be on Monday, June 8th. Our special guest is Dominique. Actually, Susan, you said her name was pronounced differently. I don't know if Susan's still here. Dominique Vetter-Cole. She's with Utah Case Management. So tune in for that. It'll be on Zoom, same place, same channel. And we hope to see you there next time. Thanks, everybody.
Can I just say, since maybe Susan isn't here, or Ann might know, but my understanding is Utah Case Management, it's not part of the department. It's a community agency that does case management with people in the community, including returning individuals.
That's my understanding, yes. I think it was maybe Susan.
Yeah, it was
Amanda who
Susan.
recommended her. Maybe it was Amanda.
Yes,
Was it you,
was
Amanda? Susan,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
But she's
recommended her.
not here anymore.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We
Right,
hope to
thank
see you
you,
next
guys.
time.
Very good.
Bye.